Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode will have honest conversations with people who've walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead. Today on Unmasked, we're welcoming a guest whose story carries heartbreak and incredible purpose. In 2005, Barry Adkins lost his son, Kevin, who was 18, to alcohol poisoning, the very day that he moved out on his own. Out of that unimaginable pain, Barry has made a decision that would change countless lives. He packed up Kevin's ashes and backpacked and walked from Arizona to Montana, sharing his son's story in schools, churches, and treatment centers along the way. Since then, he has spoken nearly 400 times to more than 400,000 students and parents, offering a message about choice, resiliency, and the healing that comes through forgiveness. Barry, it is an honor to have you today here on Unmasked, and we appreciate you coming on and being willing to share your story.
Well, thanks for having me on, Wesley. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right in and tell us about your son and your story.
Yeah, so I'll pick up the story. He graduated in May of 2005. I remember going to his high school graduation ceremony, and after the ceremony, he gave me a hug and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad." And right out of high school, he got a job working for an electrician, making good money, and he met my financial requirements, so I agreed to co-sign a loan because he wanted to buy a new truck. And by the way, I made him give me 3 months worth of insurance payments and car payments before I would co-sign that loan, right? Because I didn't want to be on the hook for it. It's his deal, not mine. And I'm hoping that he'll find a truck from a private party. I'll go down to the credit union, sign papers, and be out there in about 5 minutes. He found one at a dealership. Anyone in your audience works at a dealership, but I apologize. I just have a healthy dislike for that process because I know when I walk in there, they're going to try to sell me a bunch of stuff that I don't want or need. So I got to go down to the dealership and sign papers. I sit down in the financial guy's office. The first thing that guy said to me was, "How about some life insurance?" I'm like, "Look, dude, I'm not here for life insurance. I don't need any life insurance. My wife will do just fine if something happens to me." And he said, "I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your son. I'm that guy. I'm that guy who rather indignantly told him that 18-year-old boys don't need life insurance because they don't die." But I was wrong. They do die. He wouldn't live long enough to make a single payment on that truck. So he's graduated from high school. He's got money in the bank. He's 18 years old. The next thing he wants to do is move out, right? Because he's tired of the old man telling him what to do. I made him do all those terrible things like come in and wake me up when you get home. Every now and then, maybe take out the trash. And would you mind going in the bathroom and getting your socks and underwear out of there for me? That would be great. He was tired of all that. So he came into our living room one day, and we have this brown chair that sits in front of a big picture window and looks out over our backyard. He sat down in that brown chair and started talking about how he couldn't believe his life was finally beginning and he wanted to move out. And I did my best to discourage him because honestly, we really never had any problems with him. He was the baby of the family. His high school principal didn't even know who he was, and I considered that a good thing. But I didn't have any luck talking him out of it, so a couple weeks later, his buddy Craig came over and they started the process of moving out. His definition of moving out was throwing a bed, a TV, and a dresser in the back of his new truck, and that was it. And he went back into his bedroom, and I'm sure no one has kids with this clothing system. His clothing system was a pile of clean, wrinkled clothes on the floor, a pile of dirty clothes right next to it. The kid never folded any clothes. He grabs a pair of the clean jeans, threw them in the dryer to de-wrinkle, came into the living room and told me something I've never forgotten. He said he wasn't going to take his toothbrush with him. He'd be back tomorrow morning and grab it. He put on his jeans. I walked out front with him like I normally do. Gave him a hug, told him that I loved him and to be careful, watched him drive away. It was the last time I saw him alive. That night, his friends decided to throw a little housewarming party for him. Started with a keg of beer, moved on to shots. He left a voicemail for his sister sometime around midnight talking about how drunk he is and how he loves his nephew Colin more than anything in the whole world. Shortly after that voicemail, he passed out. His friends laid him in his bed on his side in case he vomited. The party was still going on. They went in and shaved his head and his legs while he was passed out because he's just passed out, right? But his buddy Craig was worried about him, kept going back in to check on him. Around 4 a.m., calls started coming into 911. First calls were difficulty breathing. Next calls were not breathing. My son died alone in a hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed. The next morning was Sunday morning. My wife and I are sitting around drinking coffee, talking about what we're going to do or not do that day. At about 8:30 in the morning, the doorbell rings, and we're looking at each other because we weren't expecting company. And I open the door, and I see two police officers and somebody in plain clothes at the front door. Should have been a big red flag, right? It should have been, but I'm that guy. It didn't even occur to me that something bad had happened. I actually joked with them as they came in, thinking this had to have something to do with a dog or a parked car. I had nothing, man. But they didn't laugh at any of my jokes. One of the officers and a person in plain clothes stayed by the front door. The other officer walked in and stood in front of the brown chair that Kevin had sat in 2 weeks before and talked about how his life was finally beginning. He said there'd been an accident. Your son is dead. We asked who because we have a number of children. They said it was Kevin, and they handed me his driver's license. There's something pretty final about it when a police officer hands you your child's driver's license. Because until that exact moment in time, you're holding out hope, man. You're holding out hope that this is all a big mistake. You have misspelled the last name. Get out of here. You need to be 3 streets over, next door, any place but my place. But when they hand you your child's driver's license, you know he's gone and he's never coming back. One of us finally asked what had happened, and the officer said that the probable cause of death was alcohol poisoning. We found out later that that is indeed what happened. His blood alcohol content was 0.36%. Very drunk. It's the only statistic I mention, and the only reason I mention it is if you're ever in that situation, think about Kevin's buddy Craig. It's a night he'll never forget. I promise you. I can only describe the days, weeks, and months after that was dark, Wesley. It was ugly. I was angry with God, and I told him so. I was just angry with him. I chewed him upside one side and down the other. Hey, back up time. You're God. Let him live and take me. And I don't think I'm unique in that thought process. I think almost any parent would say that. A couple days later, I had another life-changing event. I was laying in bed. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was wide awake. And I can only describe it as I felt like someone had walked in the room. I didn't see him. You probably know that sensation where someone walks in behind you and you didn't see him. And then there was a light that I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. And there was a message. The message was that Kevin didn't suffer and something very good would come from this. And before I could cross-examine, it was gone. I didn't have any chance to ask any questions, to do anything. It was just there. And I'm not here to tell anyone that it made everything okay, because it didn't. But it did give me a mission to try to make something very good come from such a senseless tragedy. So one of the things we decided to do was to have him cremated. And I got a call a few days later to come and pick up his remains. So I went down to the funeral home. You walk into the funeral home and they've got nice pictures on the wall. They're playing music in the background. They take me in the office, sit me down in a big comfortable chair with a desk in front of me. And a funeral director walks in, sets an urn down in front of me. An urn that holds all the remains of the kid that I burped, changed his diapers. I coached baseball, basketball, soccer, football. I taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. All the remains of my son were sitting in an urn in front of me. There's one thing I knew at that point, and that was that I didn't want to be a victim. Because the world doesn't need any more victims. We've got plenty already. The world needs people who take something bad and they make something very good come from it. And I thought about what I would hope somebody else would do if it happened to their kid. And for me, the answer was pretty easy. It's to get out and tell the story, not for the money. Because there is no money in the world that will fix the hurt. It doesn't exist. The only thing that helps is to try to make something very good come from such a senseless tragedy. So now we got to decide, what are we going to do with his remains, right? He definitely was part of the FFA and raising pigs and riding mules and belt buckles and cowboy hats and all that stuff. And I grew up in northwest Montana, Kalispell, and he had been there a number of times and always talked about wanting to move there someday and buy a ranch. We decided to take his ashes to Montana. The normal thing to do would be put them in your car and drive there, right? But I decided to put them in my backpack and walk from Gilbert, Arizona to Kalispell, Montana, and tell the story along the way. Because I guarantee you, you don't ever want.
Wow. It's something that I wish I could say I've never been through. I lost my youngest brother at the age of 16. And
Oh,
so
wow.
my heart goes out to you. And I love how you're taking his story now and you're sharing it with a much wider audience. And you're not letting the tragedy define your life, but you're now using it to help other people improve their lives. And so my hat's off to you, Barry. And I just appreciate your openness and your willingness to share the story with us here. What a powerful story.
And for me, Wesley, let's be clear, this is a God thing. There's no way. In fact, I think I saw it on your website. God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen.
Absolutely.
Because there's no way he's going to pick me. Just not the right guy, right? Pick somebody else. That's not me.
Yeah, and that's what I love, though, is that you may not have been, you're not a trained speaker, you're not a trained, anything like that, but you do have the story to tell. And you said, okay, God, yes, I will do it. And now he's using you. He's taking the unqualified and he made you qualified and has given you the skill set to be able to do what you're doing. And I applaud you. And I thank you most of all for giving God your yes and being willing to share the story, because it's one that I know is impacting lives for the better. So tell us about your walk, that long trek. Tell us about that long trek. How long was it? And is there one part of the walk that kind of replays over and over again in your mind of something that happened on it?
I could probably talk for another 2 hours about the walk. There's just a lot of variations trying to figure out how to do it, first of all. Right. There's so many details to figure out, people that try to talk you out of it. I had a lot of well-meaning people try to talk me out of it, Wesley. But one guy said something to me I've never forgotten. He said, how do you think you'd feel about it in 5 years if you don't do it? And I thought, okay, yep, I'm going to do it. So the walk itself it's roughly 1,400 miles. It took roughly 4 months to do. You can imagine the logistics around. This predates all the cool stuff you have today. As you well know, GPS was not a thing in 2007, really. So trying to figure out where you're going to be, because I spoke 35 or 40 times. So we had to walk and then look at a paper map and go, well, we're right here. How long is it going to take me to get to that school? Because I had an organization in town, notmykid.org, that scheduled everything. So before I took off, I had to tell them when I'm going to be where, so that they could contact schools in those areas and set that up. So there was a lot of logistics around trying to figure all that out. In today's world, may have been simpler, might have been more complicated, right? I kept a blog, but that was about it. As far as cool stuff on the walk, a couple things. There was ladies that brought out brownies and milk. Every day people stopped and asked me what I was doing. If it was raining, every car that went by would stop and ask me if I needed a ride. Hey, you need a ride? But probably, I would say the coolest thing that happened was in Arizona. You probably perceive Arizona as a desert. And where I am in Gilbert, it is a desert. But northern Arizona, Gilbert's at 1,300 feet. Northern Arizona's at Flagstaff's at 7,400. So it was a challenge to get out of Arizona. And I remember I spoke at the high school in Flagstaff. And a few days later, maybe a week later, I saw a car go by and I saw the brake lights go on. So I knew, yeah, I'm going to take a break and talk to this person. And the guy gets out and he says, are you the guy that spoke at Flagstaff High School a few days ago? I said, yeah, that was me. And he gave me a hug and thanked me, because for the first time, his son came home and told him about what happened at school. And all my owies disappeared after that, the rest of the day. Plantar fasciitis, the blisters, the ingrown toenails, all of that stuff. It didn't hurt the rest of the day.
That had to have made you feel so good. As a father myself, I know your kids come home and you're like, what'd you do today? Nothing. Did you learn anything? Yeah. Not really. So to have them come home and share something like that had to have made you feel pretty good there.
And we've gotten that feedback more times since then. But on the walk, that
I don't doubt that at all. So you mentioned the paper maps. I have to ask, because I'm sure somebody's asking, did you use MapQuest or Yahoo Maps?
I didn't use either one. I had, because I didn't have internet connection anywhere. So we actually used Atlas maps, paper maps, because keep in mind that getting access to the internet in 2007, especially in
Yep.
the middle of nowhere, ain't going to happen. And I'm sure we looked up some of it on MapQuest. I remember doing some of that. But when we were out there, it was just looking at the map, that Atlas map, and saying, okay, we're right about here. I better leave now. We better stop because I might walk for a few hours and then go speak and then come back, or however, every day was different for that. Yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, most people don't even know what an atlas is now. Everything is online.
I know. I still have the Atlas. I have the document. My wife, Bev, met me every 3 miles. My one daughter walked part of it with me, but my wife, Bev, she was kind of the road manager, right? Because people ask all the time, did I sleep under bridges? What did I do? No, I slept in a hotel every night. And we marked the exact spot, mile marker, this place here. And then we went back to that spot and started from that exact same spot every day. And the only requirement I had for hotels was it had to have a bathtub.
So
I
you could
was
soak.
48 at the time. So yeah, I was soaking in that. I was soaking my feet in ice. I had plantar fasciitis. You know what that is?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, I had that. It turns out that there are certain shoes that make that much better, which I didn't know until much later on the walk. My Brooks, they're called Brooks the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
And I wore them. It fixed it. Then I started wearing other shoes. It came right back. I put those back on. But yeah, I needed to soak a lot of stuff because there was the ingrown toenails and the blisters were the most frustrating though, because they just wouldn't go away. I ended up having to have it operated on when I got back.
Oh, wow. So when you look back at the season of your life, the loss, the walk, all the conversations that you've had, what was the moment that shifted something inside of you the most from all of this that's happened?
The one thing was the message from God was, it's hard to describe that. Obviously, I didn't physically hear anybody, but I knew, the message that was conveyed.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the focus has been on making something very good come from it. And from there on, like the idea for the walk, I'm sure that was God too. The way I connected it in my mind, and obviously he helped with that. One of Kevin's favorite movies was Lonesome Dove. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It has Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall. It's about a 3.5 hour movie. It's a Western, but it's not a typical Western. It's a very, very different Western. But that movie is where the idea to walk to Montana came from.
Interesting. I'll have to check that movie out.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I decided to do that, then my focus became, how do we make this happen? There's a lot of logistics. Like I said, people tried to talk me out of it. And I understand. I think they were worried I was going to fail. And I think that's a fair concern, because I had people say, well, why don't you just walk 2 weeks each year? Right? Go out and walk a couple weeks and then come back next year. And I'm like, I don't know. I just had in my head, this is what I'm going to do. I'm sure it terrified my wife. I'm sure she cried when I told her about it.
How far on average would you say you walk today?
Each day, I averaged about 14 miles a day, because I started out, thought I wanted to take 2 days a week off to kind of recover. So I would walk 20, 15, 20, day off, 15, 20. But I found that those days off weren't really helping. And believe it or not, there's a big difference, at least for me anyway, between walking 20 miles and walking like 14.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens in those last few miles that just really wears you out. And so I settled it. It was either 13 or 14 miles a day, and just get up every morning and do it. And if I have to work around a speaking engagement, that's what we did. And we had people stop and say, hey, can you come speak at our school? And we did that. We made them all happen. One guy wanted us to go to a town. I can't remember where it was, but it was like 500 or 600 miles away. And he's like, well, I'll fly over and get you and bring you back. I'm like, no, we'll have to schedule it another time.
Let's talk after I'm done with the walk.
Yeah, after, which I've done a lot since then. The story evolves because you understand how to tell a story. My wife was really good about giving me feedback. When you talk to people, she would sit in the back and she'd say, no, you lost them with that. You need to change it or get rid of it. She was really good about feedback. So I've had a lot of help with it.
And you just said you've shared Kevin's story now hundreds of times. What is the one part of the story that consistently gets people the most?
I think for me, my guess is when I'm able to share the part about the message from God. But honestly, what I've done is I've realized that a lot of the audience is a lot younger than me. And you can almost feel it in the room because the first thing I tell them is, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to tell you a story. And as you listen to that story, maybe think about what you want your story to be. And you can kind of feel kind of this, everybody relaxes because I'm not there to preach to them and tell them how to live their life or anything like that. I'm just here to tell you a story. And then I finish it by talking about forgiveness. So 3 things: decision making, adversity, and forgiveness. And those 3 things, I get a lot of nodding of the heads, like, yep, I understand. Because forgiveness was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, this is my kid. It was easy for me to forgive the people at the party because this was his choice, and it's easy to forgive your kid. But forgiving yourself, that's a whole different thing. Took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes, but I have found a way to do it. I actually heard a pastor describe it best once. He said that anger and vengeance are going to lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself. We all make mistakes. It's the way you handle it that matters. That's the one that probably gets the most nodding of the heads.
I can see why. So that actually is a good segue. I have a kind of a 2-part question for you, and you can answer them in whichever order you want. But when something like this happens, it would be very, very easy to get angry at God, to walk away from God, to walk away from your faith and everything else because of this unimaginable loss that you've had to go through. So walk us through and your own faith and your own journey kind of through this, and why you didn't walk away, and kind of how that all kind of played a role in your story, your part of all this. And then on the flip side of that, you just mentioned forgiveness. What did forgiveness look like for you in those early years, and how has it changed now as time has passed? How did you end up being able to forgive yourself, and how did you end up being able to forgive God? Because I think a lot of people, like I said, it'd be easy to blame God for this.
Well, that message, the way I described it to a group just the other day, was it took God from the theoretical to the real. I have, everybody has faith, but you've never heard from him. I had never heard from him, right? It wasn't like, anything like this had happened before. But this event proved to me, and I'm an engineer by trade, that he's real and he's there and he cares and he wants you. Sometimes this is all part of the grief process. He's going to rebuild you. The old you died with your child, 100%. There's a new you there that he wants to mold into something. And you've got to take the time to listen to that still small voice that guides you through that. Because I wouldn't have come up with all this stuff on my own. I'm just not that creative. I'm just not. And that's basically the way I see it. And that process, that grief process, so I think what you were kind of alluding to, that takes a long time. And it's different for everybody. But the most important thing is that grief is an energy. That grief is an energy that can be put towards good or not. And the more you put it towards good, the better it's going to make you feel. Just these little things, whatever you decide to do, it might be a newfound, whatever it is. Maybe it's just a different you that appreciates life, but that grief is an energy. It's a powerful energy that you need to try to harness it. That's the best way I can describe it. It's about the only way I can describe it, Wesley. It's hard to, but because you lost your brother, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, lost my brother who was 16 tragically in a car accident. And yeah, I wasn't home when the officers came to let us know of his passing and the car accident, but I was out playing I was playing softball at the time with a team at work, and the officers came to the diamond, and he got out of the car, and all of my friends were like, he's here for you, we're making jabs and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, ha ha ha, I did, and then sure enough, he comes over and he calls out my name, and I was like, holy crap, he really is here for me.
Oh, so they told you at the game?
So no, so he came and he said, there's been a family emergency and you need to go home. That's all. And that's all he said. And now I'm probably 8 blocks from home at this point, 9 blocks. And so, but it felt like eternity driving those, as I'm sitting here in my head, like, what's going on, and I walked in the door And I can still picture the room exactly how it was laid out. And I walked in the door and I looked off to my right, and in the corner of the room was my dad's recliner chair, and he was sitting in the recliner chair, and my brother was on one arm of the chair. My youngest, the middle brother, there was 3 boys. So the middle brother and my mom was on the other arm, just crying. And I walked in the door, and that's when they said, Steven's been killed in a car accident. And it's like you just said, your old self, it dies in that moment, because now you can't go back to the way life was. There's now a new version of you. And so it's not something you ever want to hear, and it's not something you ever want to live through. And as I look back at it now as a father myself, like I can't imagine being in my dad's shoes or in your shoes and having an officer come in and tell you that kind of news. And then to be able to see the forgiveness, you've talked about your forgiveness and how you've been able to forgive the people at the party because it wasn't their fault and things like that, and how I was able to see that play out in my own story, where there in the middle of the grief with the officer standing in front of me, my dad set aside his emotions for a brief second. And he said to the officer, well, first he asked if we could see the driver of the other vehicle. And of course the officer said no. And my dad said, I understand. Can you deliver a message for me? Let him know that we forgive them and it's not his fault, in the middle of the grief.
Yeah.
And so
it's an important.
It is. It really is. And so I think that's part of the reason when I first found you and your story, I was like, I have to have him. I just have to have you on and to share it, because it's such an important story to be able to share, not only in memory of your son, but in honor of the journey that you've gone through in your forgiveness and your own personal development and everything since his passing.
I'm a different.
Absolutely. So, parents and students, they all carry, really just humans, we all carry these deep fears around things like alcohol. Parents are afraid that the students are going to get into it at a young age, or really this could be anything, but we'll use alcohol just because of your story. And decision making, and parents are trying to figure out how to help their students make good decisions and responsible decisions, especially as they get older and they're at a point where mom and dad can no longer really tell them what to do, because they're not going to listen. So what is something that you wish that every family could understand right now before it's too late?
It can happen to you. That's the reality, because like I said, I'm that guy. We all kind of hear stories at a distance, but we never believe those things are going to happen. One of the more common things people ask me is, well, did you ever talk to him about alcohol? And the answer to that was no. I talked to him about drugs a lot, but we had an example in the family, and he always said how stupid he was and how he was never going to let that happen to him. But people, especially young people, that part of their brain is not developed yet. The reasoning part of their brain is not developed yet. And so they tend to do stuff that they don't think about the consequences of. It's, drugs and alcohol, these things. What I tell everybody is, the drinking age is 21 for a reason. And everybody says, oh, well, that's just not fair to them. They should be able to drink at 18, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, wait until you're 21. I promise you, you will not regret it. And that I just spoke at high school yesterday, and that's the thing I told them was, I'm not here to tell you you can never drink, because that's kind of absurd. Although there are people still in this world that think we should go back to the days of prohibition. And you and I both know that's not going to work. But wait until you're 21, because by the time you're 21, you're a lot more mature. You'll understand some of the consequences behind these things. The statistics don't lie. The younger you start drinking, the more likely you are to have other problems. And it's so easy to start, as you know, but the industry for addiction and rehab, I actually looked this up because I was curious about it, is $35 billion a year. It is a huge industry because it is so difficult to get people to stop and to recover from this. It just is. And that's why it's such a big industry.
Yeah, it really is. I'm very active in recovery circles and in the program called Celebrate Recovery. It's a Christ-centered recovery group.
Yeah.
And we see people all the time that come in that are, well, they're there for 2 reasons. Either They're there because they finally have admitted that they want to change, and they're there to help, for the help to do it. Or they're there because people drag them in because they need them to change. And so they're there because they're being made to. And that's one thing that I like to point out to people, is the intentions are good. And you can drag somebody into recovery meetings and stuff to get them help. But changes are not going to happen unless they want the change to happen. And that's something that you need to understand, is if you're listening to this, and this, I was not planning on talking about this or telling anybody this during this episode, but the topic has naturally gone this way, and I believe it's for a reason, is, if you're out there and you're listening to us have this conversation and somebody that's struggling with something, the best thing that you can do is just be there and let them know that you're there for them and that you want to help them, and you will help them in any way that you can. But then you have to leave it in their court, because if they don't want help, then it's whatever you do is not going to stick. They have to want the help. They have to want the change if it's going to stick. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's a hard pill to swallow, especially when you see a loved one, and somebody that you just care about, a good friend or whatever it is, going through something really difficult. It's a really hard thing to do, sit there and watch. But sometimes they have to go down that road before they realize that something has to change.
Yeah, and I've listened to, and I'm sure you have too, I've listened to a lot of recovery stories through the years. And the common theme is basically just like what you just said. Every one of them said, you know what? I just reached a point where I said, if I don't stop, this is going to kill me. It was their decision. They said, I just one day said, I'm done. Now, maybe there are relapses, maybe there aren't. It all depends. But every one of them said it was their decision. It was one of those things where one day they just realized that, yeah, you got to stop or it's going to kill you.
So after speaking now to more than 400,000 people, just think about that number for a second. 400,000 people. That's a lot of people. What have you learned about hope, where it comes from, and what helps people rebuild after they've been through something like this and they've lost essentially everything?
It's a mindset. It very much is a mindset, and it all ties back to faith. These journeys that we're all on, and the Bible talks about it, right? In James, I think it's chapter 1. I'm not good at chapter and verse, but he talks about how you should count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. And these trials will make you perfect and complete. And I agree that these trials are what make you a different person, that give you hope. But you have to lean on the Lord. I guarantee you I did, because I didn't understand. Because as a human, you don't understand, well, why would he let him die and not take me, right? But you have to let go and let him run the show. And it's easy to talk about. It's harder to do.
Yeah, it really is. Really is. So one of the things I like to ask my guests is, I'm really big on action items. My book that just came out, every chapter I end with action items for the person to follow. At the end of all my solo episodes every Tuesday, I leave an action item of some kind, something that they can do, something they can meditate on. And so if you had to pick one action item to leave the listeners with today that they could take in their own life, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to bring me in. It takes contacts. Most schools and churches and stuff it's not like you send them an email and they're going to let you do it. If you want to help make something very good come from this, bring me in. Let me tell the story. Take that action. Everybody's got contacts, including you, probably. Make it happen. I promise you won't regret it. I don't do this for the money, Wesley. I don't. If I have to travel, there are travel costs. But in Arizona, I pay for my own gas to go do this stuff. I'm not in it for the money. And I think God wants me to tell the story. And that's probably what I'll be doing until I can't do it anymore.
And what action item would you leave the listeners to do in their own lives to be able to take that step forward and maybe forgiveness or, overcoming loss, or just in their personal walks with Christ? What's that one action item you would leave them to do in their personal lives?
Let go. Go of all that bitterness and anger. Turn it over to him. The Bible talks about that. I don't remember the chapter and the verse, but he talks about getting rid of all bitterness and anger and rage and turn it over to him. He's there, he's real, and he can help. But you have to let go. And as men, specifically, that's hard to do. right? Because everybody, especially men, want to fix something, right? We want to fix it ourselves. And sometimes you aren't the one that's going to fix it. He's going to fix it for you. So let
Yeah.
go.
As men, it's definitely hard to let go sometimes. I totally relate with that.
Yeah.
So what you've mentioned a couple of Bible verses. What is your favorite Bible verse that has continually stuck with you through this whole process?
There's two, and I can't quote you the chapters and that kind of stuff, but there's a spot, it's in the New Testament where Paul says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And the other one's in the Old Testament. Is it in Psalms? I think so. But it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path.
So you've told us amazing story of your son and what you're out doing now, speaking and sharing his story to help others. What else are you up to today? Where can people find you if they want more information on Barry, or they want to bring you in to speak at their school or church or organization? Where can they find you online?
The website is kevinslastwalk.com. And then on Facebook, it's Kevin's Last Walk, all one word. There's a contact page on Kevin's Last Walk. And then obviously on Facebook, you can message me. What I'm up to next, that's a question I get asked a lot, is what's next for Barry? And to be honest, when people say that, I think, well, I wrote a book and I walked to Montana, isn't that enough? But it did get me to thinking that one of the things people say, with your point with the action items, is what's really the call to action? And I was talking to another podcast that said, well, maybe you should do a walk, right? Kind of in memory, maybe a 2 mile or a 5K or something. I thought, I'm not interested in doing that. That's not me. But it occurred to me, and again, I think it's a God thing. I put his ashes in my backpack and I walked from Arizona to Montana to raise awareness around prevention and to honor my son. There is no reason that everybody else couldn't do the same thing. They can pick their distance. They can pick why they're walking, how long it's going to take them, and they can go do a walk. It might be, for somebody who can't walk much, it might be 30 miles in a year or 10 miles in a year, whatever it is, wheeling. But they can pick their distance. They can pick when they want to do it. And what I want to do is we're going to add up all the miles, and it's going to be called the 1,000,000 Mile Challenge, because I'm sure we can get enough people to walk to get 1,000,000 miles. And they'll be able to give us a picture of whoever they're walking for. Maybe somebody that's passed away. It may be an addict that you're praying for, but everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody. And the goal is 1,000,000 miles. If everybody logs their miles, I've been told that's a pretty conservative number. I'm going to stick with it though, but it's going to be called the 1,000,000 Mile Challenge. I'm hesitant to do that at 67, Wesley, but here I am doing it. So it's going to be a very different challenge, but we'll get it done.
So if people are interested in this 1,000,000 Mile Challenge, where can they find out more information on it? Do you have any materials out there or anything like that yet?
I don't have anything out yet, but if you, I guess you can subscribe or be a follower on Kevin's Last Walk on Facebook. We're just now starting TikTok and Instagram because I'm told I need to do that. So I got people. I'm not good at that stuff. But if you follow Kevin's Last Walk, just click on that and be a follower. You'll get notified. And we're going to do our best to put it out there. I think it's a really interesting idea because it doesn't matter who you are or when you walk. You can make it happen and honor somebody or raise awareness. We want to raise awareness around prevention because it's just not. It's not a.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great goal. 1,000,000 miles. That's a lot of miles, but I'm excited to follow your journey. And Barry, I just really appreciate you once again coming on today and sharing the story about your son and honoring his life and just encouraging others to take that step and to let go of their own pains and to be there for their loved ones. It's been a pleasure having you on today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Wesley. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. If this episode encouraged you, would you take a moment to follow, rate, and share it with somebody who you think could benefit from hearing it? For more information or encouragement for more encouragement and information on having me speak at your church or events or my coaching services, visit wesleyfarnsworth.com, and don't forget to connect with me on social media. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and freedom begins when we all live unmasked. God bless you.